Every story starts with a first sentence. Does that first sentence actually hold a lot? Let's talk. Excuse me. Welcome back to the show. My name is Rob. This is my mom, Karen. And as always, we like to ask these specific questions of how books are shaped, written, and, debated on. And what better discussion than the first sentence or line of a story? A common question that I always see throughout the internet is: does the first line, or theoretically maybe the first paragraph, make or break a given book? Um, so obviously, going through, doing my research and stuff, there's the obvious two ways to look at it. First one is, yes, a strong sentence will give you a very good idea of what you're about to get into, and usually, if done right, will make you want to read through the end. On the flip side, of course, a weak or, not so huzzah type of thing may not want or may not allow you to continue because you're already slightly bored with whatever. But as I was telling you a second ago, for my thing is, I think it kind of really, it goes back to, I think we talked about how people read, why we read what we do. I think it really is going to be how your brain comprehends it. There's a lot of books that I've started that are supposedly bestsellers and whatever, and I've read a chapter. Not my thing. It's great for everybody else. Not cool. A lot of books that I love that I've told titles to, and people go, no way, not touching that. Because maybe they read it in school 500 times.
Right.
So I think generally speaking, the first line is important to what you're reading. And we have a couple examples here, one of which comes from the Stephen King's The Gunslinger, which is part of his Dark Tower trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
And this particular one, it goes, the man in black fled across the desert and the gunslinger followed. That's how he starts off this particular book. Now, they call this remarkable or good. It's generally intriguing to me. What I think goes well here is that it doesn't give you a lot, it doesn't give you a little, but it kind of piques your interest to maybe want to continue on. And part of me also thinks, what was the author doing when writing? Were they doing this on purpose? Was
Right.
this the best they came up with? What was going on? So that's one. Now, one that I love that I think everybody's read, 1984. It was a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13.
How can you not want to know more, right?
And for those who have read Orwell and know his books, he does a lot of the political of the day of what's going on, basically a expose on the world.
Right.
So if you know 1984, you understand what this means.
Right.
But if you haven't read it, you're going to stop and look, okay, well, off the bat, there's something wrong with the grammar here. There's something wrong with the word because the clock stops at 12, right? So off the bat, I think this is one of the best opening lines I've ever read, even if the story, is not my favorite, only because you know something is going on right off the bat. And that's what I think really grabs you. So I know you were saying kind of you're not really picky on the first sentence. So what do you think about
for me, I like to give it a little bit of a chance because I feel like if I didn't, that I wasn't being fair to the author, and that maybe it was just a rough start, whatever. And I tend to read at least a page or two, and if at that point it's not grabbing me or it's just not doing it, then I'm not going to waste any more of my time continuing to read. Right.
That is true. And then, for people who use maybe like a ghostwriter and you find out that maybe it's coming from somebody else, it's things like that you kind of also put in perspective. Okay, this might be a great sentence, but is it a great sentence of the author? Or is it the sentence or if it's maybe a nonfiction book and off the bat they're saying something like, this story might be too much for you, but, making the assumption that this thing is going to be bad to begin with, or in this case, one of the worst ones is it started out a normal day. Like, obviously we know that you're trying to make this realistic. So of course we know that in your mind, this is a normal day. I don't really need to be told that because, and it kind of makes you think, if you're telling me that now, is this going to be so unbelievable that I'm not going to believe a single thing you're writing?
And so I hear that and I say, according to who? What is normal?
It,
Literally, that's where my head goes immediately. It's like, well, you're normal, but unless you tell me what your normal is, I'm only going to go by my normal, and you don't want to be there, kind of thing, you know. So that's
right.
interesting. You're right, absolutely.
And I think something that I remember when I was doing, classes, creative writing classes, is that was the one thing that like I always hated to do because it was so difficult to write. But the teachers were always saying, okay, write something that you never would have seen before. Write something that's going to, pull in. And everything you wrote was something you've heard and something you've seen. And it's always hard to go, well, what is it that I'm going to write that's going to drag you into my book versus somebody else? And it was always the darndest thing to do. And the teacher's always, okay, go back, do it again. Okay, go back, do it again. And you start to realize when authors do write, this is probably what they're doing to themselves, that they're going, okay, no, this doesn't work, let's start over. No, this doesn't work,
Right,
let's,
right.
because you are trying to get a story started differently, or hopefully differently, than the person next to you.
So, do you think there are particular qualities that make for a great opening line?
Um, that's a tough one. I mean, like I said, for 1984, whatever it is that he wrote, because the line itself is not remarkable. It's a very simple line. He just
Right.
said, it's a cold day in April, the clock struck 13. It's not a very fancy line, but it makes you startle for a second because you go, hold on, wait a minute.
So
So
that's
I think
quality.
maybe if
That would be a quality, right? So the quality, one of the qualities is that it startles you.
I guess, yeah. I mean, I guess it doesn't have to be the most amazingly sounding, but if there's something in the line that makes you stop and
Right.
go, hold, that I guess would be a good quality to a good opening line, or to give the benefit a good opening paragraph, depending on
Right.
how short it is. So that's a hard one. I mean, what's funny is the question here is, it's a good question, but I can't remember a book that started off amazingly, which makes me wonder, was it that amazing, of a book if the beginning doesn't stick as much as I expected it to?
Right. So can you think of a book or a story or anything that
I
has
mean,
that first
the one
sentence?
when we actually went over 2001, I think was a great one because Arthur C. Clarke started out in the past, back before humans came to be, and started his book off kind of like a nature documentary, basically following a group of early primates going about their business, hunting, gathering, doing this stuff. So I think what made that one interesting and remarkable for me was that you open the book up and you expect, okay, this is science fiction. I'm going to automatically see lasers and whatever. And what I got was nature, and I got this whole chapter of, this is the story of our ancestors, basically.
Right.
And I was just kind of like, it wasn't what I expected, but I was like, okay, that actually does stick even
Right.
years after reading it. So I guess that might be a good example of this. But really, I can't think of a book that really, when you read the first, it just goes, oh my God, that line's never going to go in my head. So I don't know. It's a hard.
Right, and I would assume that it would also change in terms of what the category kind of book. Like when I think of
Right,
romantic fiction, I'm not sure unless it's like a mystery, where they're escaping into whatever, that the first line is going to make a difference other than it's describing the scene that you're about to enter. Maybe
right.
it's, that kind of thing. But if it's a fantasy book or a science fiction book, I can totally see where that first sentence, first paragraph needs to grab you, right?
I think depending on the genre, you might have a little bit easier of a time because that genre is already remarkable, as we're using the word, already. So you already kind of have a stand. You just
Right,
have to now make it
right,
yours, right?
right. Well, we encourage people to go visit your online bookstore, Gently Used Books, that bring us a lot of warmth and community. I think we literally get
Yes.
community from online books at the Next Chapter Bookstore.shop. All sorts of categories. When you go there on the front, just type in the category you want to go to, if you whatever you're looking for. There's some really great things there. Um, and as always, it's a blast to do this with you, Rob.
Always fun. Can't wait till next time.
So we'll see you guys next week on Books Banter and beyond. Bye, everyone.